Hello everyone, I'm Irawan here, and as you see in the picture, right? So before we start, I want to make you like some narration about a coffee shops. So imagine you own a coffee shops, and tomorrow morning customer will come and order coffee. But here is the problem: how many cup of coffee should you prepare? Is it 50 cups? Is it 100 cups? Or maybe 200 cups? If you prepare too little, so customer will leave because the coffee is runs out. But if you prepare it too much, ingredients are wasted and your cost is gonna increase. So how do business solve this problem? So they use something called forecasting. And in this video, I'm going to explain how forecasting works in business. Well, in today's video, so we are going to talk about an important of concept in business and operation management called forecasting. Forecasting is essentially the process of predicting the future, and because the business constantly need to estimate things like how many product customer will buy, how much inventory they need, how many employees should be scheduled, and even how much revenue they might earn. So forecasting help companies prepare for the future before it actually happen. Then we start the open equation here. Let's think about a simple example. How does company know how many products they should produce next month? Let's take a coffee shop as an example here. How many cups of coffee should they prepare tomorrow morning? So the decision is actually very important. If they prepare too little coffee, they will lose customer. If they prepare too much coffee, they will waste resources. So, company need a way to estimate future demand as accurately as possible. And this is exactly what the forecasting helps them to do. So, what is the forecasting? So, forecasting is often defined as the art and science of predicting future events. So, it's called an art because sometimes it involves judgment and experience. But it is also a science because forecasting often use data and analytical method. In business, forecasting is commonly used to first we can use it as a predict sales here, and we can do a predict customer demand and support important business decisions. Well, for example, a company might analyze last year's sales data to predict how much they will sell next month. And sorry, I'm still using the Indonesian word here because I'm in Indonesia right now and I have to explain to my student with Indonesia. And kenapa forecasting penting? It is mean why forecasting is important. Yeah. So forecasting is extremely important because it influences many business decisions. Well, for example, like in the production planning, company must decide how many product to produce. In inventory management, company must decide how much stock to keep in their warehouses. And forecasting also help with the workforce planning, so meaning how many employees are needed. And it's also important for financial planning, such as budgeting and investment decisions. So without the forecasting, companies may face serious problems. They may produce too much and increase storage costs, or they might produce too little and lose potential sales. So both situations can hurt the company. So we see the case study in the Disneyland. So let's look at a real world example where one company that heavily uses forecasting is Disney. Disney need to predict many things for their theme park. For example, like how many visitors will come to the park and how many employees should be scheduled, how much food should restaurant prepare, and how should rides be scheduled. And Disney make a forecast on different time scale. Like they forecast daily, they forecast weekly, they forecast monthly, and they even forecast yearly. So this show how forecasting play a major role in managing large organization. A forecasting time horizon in here. So another important concept in forecasting is called forecasting time horizons. The time horizon refers to how far into the future we want to predict. So there are three main types in here. First is short-term forecasting. So this usually cover less than 1 year. So short-term forecasts are used for operational decisions like scheduling employees or managing inventory. And second, well, we have the medium-term forecastings, which usually cover 3 months to 3 years. So these forecasts help company plan sales, budget, and production level. And the third one, we have the long-term forecasting, which usually cover more than 3 years. Well, long-term forecast supports strategic decisions like investment, new product development, and business expansion. And we have also the types of forecast here, like forecasting can also be classified based on what we are trying to predict. Yeah, one type is the economic forecasting. This predict future economic condition like inflation, unemployment, or the economic growth. And then another type is the technological forecastings. So this predict future developments in technology. For example, like advancement in artificial intelligence or electric vehicle. And another very important type is the demand forecastings. So demand forecast predict how much customer will buy in the future. For most business, demand forecasting is one of the most critical forecasting activities. And let's remove the strategic importance of forecasting because forecasting also play a strategic role across different departments in an organizations. So, for example, in supply chain management, forecasting help determine how much raw materials should be purchased. In human resource, forecasting help determine how many employees are required. In the capacity planning, forecasting help determine how much production capacity the company needs. So forecasting help company use their resources more efficiently and avoid unnecessary costs. And this is the 7 steps in the forecasting. In practice, forecasting usually follow as a structured process. There are 7 basic steps. First is determine the purpose of the forecast. And the second is identify what needs to be forecasted. Third, determine the time horizons. And then the fourth, forecasting model. And then the fifth is we try to collect the necessary data. Six is generate the forecast using the selected method. And finally, validate the result to make sure the forecast is accurate enough. So following these steps help business create more reliable forecasts. So in general, forecasting can be divided into two main approaches. So the first is qualitative forecasting. Qualitative forecasting relies on experience, expert opinions, and judgment. And the second one is the quantitative forecasting. Well, quantitative forecasting uses the historical data and mathematical models. So in many cases, company combine both approach to produce better predictions. And as we see that we have the qualitative and quantitative forecasting method in here, we have the example like a qualitative forecasting method like a jury of executive opinion, DLP methods, Salesforce composite, and market survey. And typically it's used when a new product and limited historical data. And the next one we have the quantitative forecasting methods. It's used like a knife method, moving average, exponential smoothing, trend projection, and regression analysis using the historical data. Well, we have also here the time series components because when the forecasting use a historical data, we often analyze something called a time series. A time series is a simply data that is recorded over time. Well, time series data usually contains four components. The first is trend, which represent the long-term direction of the data, and the second is seasonality, which refers to a pattern that repeat over time. And for example, like sales might increase during the holidays. And the third is cycle, which are longer term fluctuations. And the fourth is random variation, which represent unpredictable change. So understanding these components help business improve forecasting accuracy. So let's move to the knife method here. Well, it's called the knife method. So this is actually the simplest forecasting method. So the idea behind the knife method is very straightforward. Just like the forecast for the next period is simply equal to the actual value from the very previous period. Well, in other words, we assume that what happened last period will happen again in the next period. So, for example, in here, as you see that what happened in the January, so you do the forecast, it will have the same result, and the next February will be 200, right? So, if sales in May were 210, then the forecast or June using the knife method will also be 210 units. You know what? Even though this method is very simple, it is often used as the baseline model to compare with other forecasting method. Yeah. So it is just the easy one. Like if you want to know like what is the forecast of the June, so you just predict from the previous event here. It's 210. So it will be 210 here. And the next is moving average method in here. So let's see here. Okay, it's called a moving average method. So it's unlike the naive method, which only use the most recent data point. So moving average use the average of several previous periods. The purpose is to smooth out fluctuation in the data, so the forecast becomes more stable. So the basic formula is moving average equals to the demand from several previous periods divided by the number of periods. For example, if you use a 3 months moving average, we calculate the forecast using the average of the last 3 months data. So this method is widely used in the business because it is simple, practical, and relatively stable. And as you see that here, uh, wait a minute. Okay, so here, you know what, like if you wanted to know like what is the forecast, so you can just put like 10, 12, 30 is according the 3 months previous and divide it become to three. You Okay, now let's look at a simple example here, like a small coffee shop want to forecast future sales in order to plan inventory and staffing. Then the manager decides to use the 3 months moving average method. So here's the sales data for the first 5 months. As you can see, we have a 20, 25, 30, 28, and 35 on May. So your task is calculate the forecast for April, May, and June using the 3 month moving average method. So this is just the easy one. If you want to know what is the 3 month average method for the April, just look at the 3 month previously. 20 in January, 25 in February, and 30 in March. So just 20 plus 25 and plus 30 and then divide it by 3. Then you will find here how much it is. Yeah. And if you want to know how much the May their prediction, so we just account from the 3 month previously. It's mean that February, March, April, and this is the number 25 plus 30 plus 28 and then divide it by 3. Then if you want to know about the June, so then you just like count all the number 3 month previously. So it's been like March, April, and May. So just plus 30, 28, and 35, and I divide it to 3. Yeah, so you will know about it. And the next is the exponential smoothing. Like this method is a little more advanced than moving average. So exponential smoothing update the forecast by adjusting the previous forecast using the most recent data. So the key idea is simple. A new forecast is created by taking the previous forecast and adjusting it based on the most recent forecasting error. Well, actually, the adjustment is controlled by a parameter called alpha and also called known as the smoothing constant. Then the value of alpha ranges between 0 and 1. And if alpha is close to 0, so the forecast changes slowly. But if alpha is close to 1, the forecast reacts quickly to the data. And here is the exponential smoothing. Here's the so FT is plus 1 equals in here, and then FT plus alpha multiplied by AT minus with FT. So where FT plus 1 is the new forecast, and then FT is the previous forecast, and AT is the actual demand. And alpha is the smoothing constant. So to calculate the forecast, we usually follow three steps. First, we calculate the forecast error, which is the difference between actual demand and the forecast. And the second is multiply the error by alpha. And the third one is at the adjustment to the previous forecast. So the process allow the forecast to continuously update as a new data becomes available. Well, here is the example. Like a coffee shop predict at the February sale would be 200 cup of coffee. However, you know, the actual sales turned out to be 230 cups. So the forecasting error is 230 minus 200. So which equal 30, right? So it is just a step one. And the manager used a smoothing constant alpha equal to 0.30. So first we multiply the error by alpha. So it's mean that 0.30 times 30 equals 9. So then we add this adjustment to the previous forecast. So the new forecast becomes 200 plus 9 equals 209. So this means the forecast for the next period is 209 cups of coffee. And then the next one is why do we measure error? So when we create a forecast, an important question arises like how accurate is our forecast? To answer this question, we need to measure forecasting error. Well, measuring error is important for several reasons. First, we want to know which forecasting method is more accurate. And the second, we want to know whether our forecasts are improving over time. And third, we want to know if our forecasting model needs improvement. Because without measuring forecasting error, we will have no way of knowing whether our predictions are reliable. And you see that's it's still the forecast accuracy measure here because as we know that to evaluate forecast accuracy, several performance measures are commonly used, and we have three of the most common, and they are MAT, which stand for the mean absolute deviations. So MAT measures the average absolute forecasting error, and the second main measure is MSE or mean square error, and MSE calculates the average of the square error which give more weight to larger mistakes. So the third measure is MAPA or mean absolute percentage error. So MAPA express the error as a percentage, which make it easier to interpret. So this metric help us to determine which forecasting method perform the best. So this one we compare two forecasting method. We have a method A and method B. So we start by looking the actual demand and the forecast value from its method. Then we calculate several types of error here. First, we calculate the forecast error, which is different between the actual value and the forecast. You see that this is the forecast from the method A and the first code method B. And we want to compare which one is the worst one, which one is the best one. The first step is we start by to count the error. How we know the error is just like the actual sellers and minus to the forecast with the method A. So 100 minus 95, so it's been 2. And then for the forecast B, just actual sellers in the Monday, and then we minus with the forecast B of method with the method B forecast in the Monday. So it's mean the error is 2. We just like Mine is the 120 to 110, so it's been 10 or something like that. But let's refocus on here. And sometimes we find that the answer must be in the minus two. And remember that in this, we have to know that we have what we call the absolute error. Absolute error is the condition where we have to delete all the minus. So it's must be plus. It doesn't matter. It's minus, minus, or anything. You can just be plus, something like that. So yes, after we calculate the forecast errors, so next we calculate the absolute error, which remove the negative signs as I give to you, and then we calculate the square error, which is used for the MSE. You know, then after that we just make it a square. 5 square is 25, and 2 also square is meaning it's 4. So all of them. So it becomes the 25, 100, 5 square is 25, 10 square is 100, and all of them is like this. Yeah. And then finally we calculate the percentage error, which is used for MAPA. This value allow us to evaluate accuracy of its forecasting method. So we start from the mean absolute deviation here. To calculate MAD, we first sum all the absolute error and divide it by the number of the observation. For the method in here is 55. The total absolute error is 55. Since there are several observations, so the math is 55 divided by 7. Where do you get the 55? It's just the plus from 5 plus 10, 5, 10, 10, 10, and 5. If you count it and then the sum it, and the total will be 55, and then divide it to 7. And then for the result will be the 7.86 cups per day for the method A. For the method B, the total absolute error is a 14 and dividing by 7, so if give a MAD of 2. So method B have much smaller average error. And we have the mean square error here, or we call it MSE. So instead of absolute error, MSE use square error. For method A, like the total square error is 475. Dividing by 7 give an MSE of approximately 67.86. And for method B, the total square error is 28. So divided by 7 give an so it's give an MSE of 4. Again, we can see that the method B produces much smaller error. Next, we will use the MAPA here, or we call it mean absolute percentage error. Well, actually, MAPE expressed the forecasting error as a percentage. For method A, the MAPE value is approximately 5.83%, and for the method B, the MAPE value is approximately 1.52%. So this means that the method's P prediction deviate from the actual value by only about 1.52% on the average. Then the question will be like, Pak Irawan, sir, where do you get this number? 5, 8.33, 3.85, 7.14. So I got this number, from the error and divide it by the actual and then multiply by 100. All of them is like that. 4 and like this, 4 is divided by 120 and multiply to 100%. So these are the result. Just sum it and then divide it to 7. So this is the final comparisons. So let's compare the overall results. So method A have a MAD of 7.86 and an MSE of 67.86 and a MAPE of 5.83%. So meanwhile, the method B has a MAD of 2 and MSE of 4 and MAPE of 1.52%. Oh, because method B has smaller error across all the three measures, so we can conclude that the method B provides a more accurate forecast. And this is exactly why measuring forecast accuracy is so important in forecasting analysis. Well, and that's a basic introduction to forecasting in business. So in this video, we discuss like what forecasting is, why it is important, and several forecasting methods, and how to evaluate forecast accuracy. If you found this video helpful, so feel free to subscribe my channel and for more lesson about the business and management and analysis. So see you in the next video. Bye bye. Bye.